There is a particular kind of madness that the jungle produces in men who stay in it too long. I had heard about it before I shipped out, not from the army, who didn't like to talk about such things, but from a veteran at a bar in Columbus who had done 2 tours and come back with both his legs and most of his mind intact. He told me that the jungle worked on you slowly, that it got into the gaps between your thoughts and widened them, that after enough time, the line between what you were seeing and what you were imagining became so thin that it stopped mattering which side of it you were on. The jungle doesn't scare you, he said, turning his glass in slow circles on the bar. It converts you. I thought about that on the morning of the 4th day, when I woke up and the first thing I did, before checking my rifle, before scanning the perimeter, before any of the things the army had drilled into me, was look at the tree line to see if she was there. She wasn't, not yet. We had been in the jungle for 3 days. Rodriguez had been gone for 2 of them. Hayes had stopped mentioning him by name, which I understood to be its own kind of statement. Hayes didn't waste words on things he believed were finished. Carter had gotten quieter. That worried me more than anything else. Carter from Georgia was not a quiet person by nature. He talked the way some people breathe, continuously and without apparent effort, filling every silence with commentary on the food, the weather, the war, the particular unfairness of every situation he found himself in. Silence from Carter meant something had reached him somewhere that conversation couldn't follow. Briggs still hadn't spoken, but Briggs hadn't spoken since the ambush, and at this point I had started to think that might just be who Briggs was now. Some people come back from the edge of dying and leave their voice behind as payment. Hayes was Hayes, impossible to read, steady in the way that mountains are steady, not because nothing moves them, but because whatever moves them is too slow to see. And me, John Mercer from Ohio, who was spending his mornings checking the tree line for a girl who couldn't possibly be there. 4 men in a jungle that went on forever, looking for a river that refused to appear. I saw her for the 2nd time at noon. We had stopped to rest in the shade of a cluster of trees so massive they had their own weather system, cool and damp beneath their canopy, the air tasting of bark and slow water. Hayes was studying the light again, trying to recalibrate our direction. Carter was asleep sitting up, which was a skill I had never mastered and admired deeply. Briggs was cleaning his rifle with the focused calm of a man performing a religious ritual. I was looking at nothing in particular when my eyes snagged on her. Further away this time, maybe 80, 90 yards, a white shape between 2 dark trunks, barely visible through the layered green of the undergrowth. She was standing sideways to me, not watching me the way she had the first time, but looking at something further into the jungle, her head turned away. The white of her clothing was the only reason I could see her at all in that light, in that distance. Everything else blurred into shades of green and brown and shadow. I watched her for a full minute without moving, without breathing almost. She didn't move either. Then she turned her head slowly, the way you turn to look at something you've been aware of for a while, and looked directly at me. Even at that distance, I was certain of it. That animal certainty again, the one that doesn't need confirmation. I raised my hand. I don't know why. Some reflex of the world I came from, where you raised your hand to acknowledge someone across a distance. She raised hers back and pointed, the same direction as before, off to the right, deeper into the jungle, a direction that didn't correspond to east or west or any point on the compass I was trying to navigate by. "Hayes," I said. "I see her," Hayes said, without looking up from the light. I turned to him. "You what?" "Don't follow her, Mercer. You can see her right now." He looked up then, looked at the space between the trees where she was standing. His expression didn't change. I said, "Don't follow her." I turned back. She was gone. The space between the trees was just trees. "Hayes," I kept my voice low, aware of Carter sleeping 10 feet away, of Briggs and his careful, methodical hands. "What is she?" He was quiet for long enough that I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, Something that lives here. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He folded his map, useless, but he kept folding and unfolding it anyway, the habit of a man who needed something to do with his hands. I've seen things like her before, other jungles, other places, things that look like people because that's the shape that works on us. That gets us moving in the direction they want. What direction do they want? He picked up his rifle, time to move. We moved west, or what Hayes said was west, for 3 hours. The jungle didn't change. The light didn't change. The particular quality of the silence between sounds didn't change. I was beginning to develop a theory that the jungle wasn't a place so much as a condition, a state of being that you entered and that expanded around you as you moved through it, always the same size, always the same distance from its own edges. I didn't share this theory with anyone. It didn't seem helpful. Carter fell into step beside me late in the afternoon. He walked in silence for a while, which was still unusual enough to notice, and then he said, very quietly, "You see that girl?" I looked at him. When? At the rest stop, middle of the day, white dress. Yeah, I said, I saw her. Good, he exhaled. Good, okay, because I thought. He stopped, shook his head. I thought maybe I was losing it. You're not losing it. She was pointing at something. I know. You think it's a trap, VC using a girl to lead us into. I don't think she's VC, Carter. He was quiet for a moment. No, he said finally. No, I don't think so either. A pause. What do you think she is? I thought about what Hayes had said, something that lives here. I don't know, I said. He nodded like that was the answer he'd expected. We walked the rest of the way in silence, which somehow felt companionable rather than empty, the silence of two people who have agreed that some things don't have words yet. We found the graves just before dark. We almost walked through them, almost, because Hayes stopped suddenly, arm out, fist closed, the signal for halt that was so drilled into us it bypassed conscious thought entirely. We froze. He crouched. We crouched. For a moment I thought he'd spotted something tactical, a tripwire, a position, something that the years had trained him to see before the rest of us could. Then I looked where he was looking, and I understood. It was a clearing, smaller than the ones we'd been using to camp. The trees around it were different from the trees everywhere else. Older, I thought, though I couldn't have explained what made them look that way. Their roots had grown up out of the ground and then back down in long arching loops, like something between a root and a cage, forming low boundaries around irregular mounds of earth that were spaced too evenly and too deliberately to be natural. Graves, maybe 20 of them. Some old, so old the mounds had nearly subsided back into the ground, distinguished from the surrounding floor only by a slight regularity of shape and a quality of the soil that was different from the soil beside it. Some less old, some that still had objects placed on them, half consumed by moss and root, a ceramic bowl cracked down the middle, something that had once been fabric, now indistinguishable from leaf matter, a piece of metal I couldn't identify. No markers, no names, just the mounds and the objects and the particular quality of silence that I was beginning to recognize, that total, switched-off silence, as if even the insects understood that something required their respect. Don't touch anything, Hayes said. Nobody had been planning to. We stood at the edge of the clearing for a long time. I don't know what the others were thinking. I was thinking about Rodriguez, about the boot print in the mud with nothing after it, about whether this was where the jungle put the things it took. Then Carter made a sound, a short, compressed sound, the kind your throat makes when your voice tries to work and doesn't quite, and I followed his gaze to the far edge of the clearing. She was there, standing beside the oldest of the graves, the one that had sunk furthest back into the earth, still in white, still watching us, but closer than she had ever been, maybe 30 feet away, close enough that I could see her face clearly for the first time. She was young, younger than I had estimated from a distance. Maybe 15, maybe 16. Her face was the kind of face that under other circumstances in another life would have been ordinary, the face of a girl walking to school or laughing at something with her friends. Ordinary, and therefore, in this context, in this light, in this clearing full of graves, something close to unbearable to look at. She was not smiling. She was not threatening. Her expression was something I didn't have a good word for, not sad, exactly, though there was grief in it. More like the expression of someone who has been waiting a very long time and has made their peace with the waiting without ever making their peace with what caused it. She looked at me, not at Hayes, not at Carter, not at Briggs. At me. And she opened her mouth. No sound came out, but I could read the shape of it, not a word, not in any language I knew, but a name. 2 syllables. The shape of a name. She was speaking into the silence of a clearing that hadn't heard a human voice in a very long time. Her own name. I was certain of it, the way you are certain of things in dreams. Then Hayes grabbed my arm and pulled me back from the edge of the clearing, and the movement broke whatever had been holding the moment in place. And when I looked again, she was gone, and the grave she had been standing next to was just a mound of earth with roots growing over it like a closed hand. We camped away from the clearing, far enough that we couldn't see it, though I was not sure that distance meant anything in that jungle, not sure that the rules of geography applied the same way they did in the world I came from. Hayes didn't sleep. I was certain of that now. He hadn't slept, or hadn't slept fully, since the first night. He sat against his tree with his eyes open and his rifle in his hands, and he watched the dark with the patience of a man who had learned that the dark always had something to show you if you waited long enough. I watched him instead of sleeping. It seemed safer somehow, keeping my eyes on something I understood, something that moved and breathed and had a history I could account for, rather than watching the tree line for things that came and went without leaving footprints. At some point in the small hours, Hayes spoke, not loudly, not to me exactly, more like someone thinking out loud, not caring whether the thoughts were overheard. First time I saw something like her was 65, he said. Different jungle, different girl, or maybe the same thing wearing a different face. I've never been sure that distinction matters. He paused. 3 men followed it. We found 2 of them. I waited. The third one we didn't find, he said. But I heard him, 3 nights later, out in the trees, walking around camp in circles, walking and not stopping, like he was looking for something he'd lost and couldn't remember what it was. The fire of the next question was in my throat before I could stop it. What happened to him? Hayes was quiet for a long time. The walking stopped, he said. On the 4th night, it just stopped. He didn't say anything else. I didn't ask. In the morning, Carter was different. Not dramatically different, not the way the movies would have it, not glassy-eyed or speaking in tongues. Subtly different, in the way that a piece of furniture is different after someone has moved it 3 inches to the left. Everything is in the right place, but the proportions are wrong, and your eyes keep snagging on something they can't name. He was quiet still, but it was a different quality of quiet now. The quiet from the day before had been the quiet of someone who had been reached by something and hadn't processed it yet, raw and recent, like a new bruise. This was older, settled. The quiet of someone who had arrived somewhere in the night and was keeping the destination to himself. He ate his rations. He checked his rifle. He fell into line when Hayes gave the order to move. But twice that morning I caught him looking at the tree line, not the way I looked, anxiously and with my heart in my throat, but with something that looked almost like recognition, like he was looking for someone he was expecting to see, like he already knew the direction she was going to point. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself a lot of things in that jungle that I didn't believe. She appeared to me one more time that day, the 3rd time. We had stopped at a stream, finally, a stream, narrow and fast and brown with sediment, but water and therefore a direction and therefore hope, and I had gone upstream a little way to fill my canteen. The others were downstream. I was alone for the first time in days, which should have been a relief and wasn't. She was on the other bank. No more than 10 feet away, closer than she had ever been, so close that I could see the details that distance had concealed. The fabric of her clothing, plain white cotton with small embroidered patterns at the collar that had faded to near invisibility. The way her hair was arranged, carefully, the way someone who cared about such things would arrange it. The cut on her left hand, across the palm, old and healed to a thin white scar. Her eyes were dark. She was looking at me without fear, without hostility, without any of the things I might have expected. She was looking at me the way you look at someone you've been trying to reach for a long time and have finally managed to get close enough to speak to. She pointed the same direction, always the same direction. "What's there?" I said. The words came out in a whisper. She didn't answer. Of course she didn't answer. She never made a sound, whatever she was, wherever she came from. But something changed in her expression. A tightening around the eyes. The look of someone trying very hard to communicate something for which they don't have the right language. Then she looked past me, back toward where the others were, and the expression changed again, sharper now, urgent in a way that made my stomach drop before I understood why. She was warning me about something. Not about the direction she kept pointing toward, about something here, something behind me. I turned around. Carter was standing 10 feet behind me on the bank. He must have followed me upstream without my hearing him. He was looking at the spot on the other bank where she had been, and she was gone again, vanished without transition the way she always did, and his face wore that expression I had noticed that morning. That settled, arrived expression. "She's been showing you something," he said, not a question. "Carter, the direction she keeps pointing." He looked at me. His eyes were fine. His eyes were completely fine, and that was somehow the most unsettling thing about all of it. "I know where it is." "How do you know where it is?" He smiled, small and private like a secret. "She told me." The water moved around my boots. Upstream, a bird called once and then was quiet. The jungle pressed in from all sides, enormous and patient and old beyond any measure I had the numbers for. "Carter," I said carefully, "when did she tell you?" He looked back at the empty bank across the stream. "Last night," he said, "while you were sleeping." He walked back toward camp. I stood in the stream and watched him go and felt something shift in my understanding of what we were dealing with, not the girl, but what the girl was doing. What it meant that she appeared to me, kept her distance, kept pointing. What it meant that she had found another way to reach Carter. Hayes had said, "Don't follow it." He hadn't said anything about what to do when it stopped waiting for you to follow and started finding other ways to lead you there. I filled my canteen and went back to camp and didn't tell Hayes what Carter had said. I'm still not sure why. Maybe I was afraid of what Hayes's face would look like if it finally changed. Maybe I wanted to believe that Carter had dreamed it, that it was nothing, that the jungle was just a jungle and the girl was just a girl, and all of this had an explanation that didn't require me to rethink everything I understood about the nature of the world. Or maybe, and this is the thing I've never been able to fully rule out, even now, even after everything that came after, maybe some part of me also wanted to know. What was in that direction? What she was pointing at? What she had been waiting in that jungle in that white dress, beside those sunken graves, for someone to finally come and find? That night just before I closed my eyes, I heard it again. Not the crying this time, not the breathing. Footsteps, slow and circular, moving around the perimeter of our camp in wide, patient loops. Around and around and around, unhurried, like a man searching for something he'd lost. Like a man who had stopped being a man some time ago and hadn't quite finished finding out what he was instead. I lay still and counted the loops until I lost count, and eventually exhaustion pulled me under into a sleep without dreams. And when I woke up, it was morning and the footsteps were gone, and Carter was staring at the tree line with that small, private smile on his face. And somewhere in the jungle, in a direction I was starting to know by instinct now, something waited. Patient as the roots, old as the trees. It had all the time in the world.